I often say that technical security saves the day. We rarely have to shoot a gun. We rarely have to bring a armed force in to protect our missions, even during these types of events. That those doors, locks, alarms, barriers, cameras, those things save people's lives.
Welcome back to After Action. I'm your host, Damaris Garcia. In 2011 and 2012, there was instability and unrest across the Saharan countries. In September of 2012, a large group of protesters gathered around and outside the U.S. Embassy in Cairo. Here today to talk about how the Diplomatic Security Service kept our U.S. Embassy and our U.S. diplomats safe is Security Engineering Officer Rahim Theriot. Welcome, Rahim. Thank you for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Damaris.
Can you set the stage for us? What was going on in Egypt at the time?
Yeah, thanks, Damaris. What was happening in Egypt when I arrived in August of 2012 was a level of tension and some anxiety surrounding the stability of the government in Egypt. As I went into the position, understanding that there may be some potential for violence, all things were calm. That August timeframe, I'm getting settled in with my family, getting to know the team. And then September 10th comes and the mission starts to get some information that there may be some protests or some security events surrounding the September 11th anniversary. And so that put the embassy, I would say, on high notice.
Right. So the Regional Security Office anticipated this protest?
No, not so much the protest itself, but there was just an anticipation of perhaps some kind of incident happening. What paralleled the September 11th anniversary was the release of this very crude, rudimentary movie that some American producer had put together. Okay. And this was a movie, I even forget the name of the title of the movie, but it was a movie spliced together surrounding the topic of the Prophet Muhammad. And there were all of these actors saying these weird lines, and this movie was released around that time. Once it became public knowledge, there immediately started to be this uptick on social media saying, kind of targeting the United States Embassy and saying that there were going to be some protests surrounding the release of this movie.
Okay, so you get this information, or the embassy gets the information around September 10th. When did things really start heating up?
So I would say on the 11th, there was an early release of the mission. Most embassy employees lived out in the suburbs. Maadi was where I lived. So the release of employees from that point was earlier during the day, outside of normal operating hours. So there's an early release. Most of the employees from the mission were moved in armored vehicles to their residences. And subsequently, I got a call from the regional security officer later that evening saying that there were large protests outside the mission, to everyone to kind of stay in place. And now I was on call to facilitate any technical security issues that may happen or arise during these protests.
And then you got the call?
And then I got the call.
Okay. When was that?
And so initially I got a call around 7:30 saying that there were about 2,000 to 3,000 protesters outside the mission, and that as a security team we needed to stand by. And then I received another call about 11 o'clock at night asking for some of my team to go back into the mission to repair some security infrastructure that had been damaged.
This was Damage because of the protesters?
Damage due to protesters standing on the walls. Now, I'm at home, but I'm watching Al Jazeera, and they're giving these kind of flash updates of protesters standing on the wall, spray painting on the side of the mission, as well as outside the mission, just in this kind of frenzy. At the same time, there are news reports that there are protests in Tunisia as well as Sudan,
right.
And it just kind of grew from there. What I didn't know at the time was that there were some protests potentially in Libya as well. We just didn't know exactly what was going on. I wasn't inside the mission, so I didn't have access to intelligence, so we were just kind of standing by and kind of focusing on our current situation.
So walk us a little bit more through that. What was your role in securing the U.S. Embassy?
So as a security engineering officer, my job was to provide maintenance and support for the regional security officer, our DS special agents, but I was in charge of security infrastructure for technical security. And working with the security, the regional security office, as well as the Marine security guards, we provided the tools that gave the regional security officer the awareness of the facility of the chancery, the embassy itself. With that, my other responsibility was I was in charge of technical security across the Northern Africa, to include a few countries in the Middle East. And so as I'm monitoring the situation in my home country, I was also getting reports from officers in Tunisia and Morocco that there were other protests and security incidents that I had to kind of make sure I was aware of.
Right. And I have to mention it. At the same time, we have terrorists that attacked our facility in Benghazi.
Correct.
So how did this affect and impact the situation that you were living through?
Yeah, so I wasn't aware of the Benghazi attack until the following morning.
Okay.
So during the event itself, I'm at home, I'm monitoring my situation in Cairo, Egypt. I'm getting a few reports from Tunisia that there was a large protest and there was some really unruliness there at that embassy compound. But it wasn't until the next morning that we started getting news reports that Ambassador Stevens' body had been found.
Yeah.
And at that point, Libya was one of the posts that we supported.
Yeah.
So I immediately turned to my team, got everyone together, turned to my team and said, look, my first month here was a great plan. It was a great idea. You know, I was trying to organize our strategy to support the posts across Northern Africa, but we had to change our strategy. We needed a handful of officers who had already been to Libya. We needed those officers to start compiling information about what we had done, about when we had service at posts, and what was there at posts. Because as I was talking to my regional security officer, Todd Brown at the time, it was clear that the department was going to start an inquiry about what had happened and what kind of security support we had in Libya. And so I had to almost segregate my team. Part of my team started to work on our Libya response, and the other team started to support all the other missions that we had and the security events that were going on at those places.
So you had a team that had to repair and bring back online anything that was damaged under Cairo embassy attacks, and then you had, well, not attacks, but a protest, and then you had another team that basically had gone into the facility in Benghazi and done security work, basically, and trying to reconstruct that. Can you go a little bit more into the roles and the support that the technical security systems provide in terms of protection of the U.S. Embassy?
Yeah, sure. So the security infrastructure we provide to embassies around the world is that extra additional layer outside of people. Right, so we're talking about camera systems, alarm systems. We support vehicle barriers, itemizers, things that detect explosives as we sample items around the mission or things coming into the mission.
We call that the perimeter security part of technical security, right?
Absolutely. And so we as a security office, as a ESC or engineering security office, we supported those, maintained those items. And those items, again, provided senior leadership on the ground, an ambassador, DCM, regional security officer, provided them the time to make decisions about what was going on, in particular around Cairo, but in other places in the world as well. So those cameras are the eyes and the ears, perhaps, of that mission. It gives senior leadership the time to analyze a situation, figure out if we need to release people, if we need to call the host government for additional security support around the mission.
Evacuations.
Whatever it is, right? Even if they need to notify Washington and let Washington know what's going on. Those tools that the ESC support and maintain provide that additional information for the decision makers.
Definitely sounds that the damage was mostly externally, outside the buildings, not inside the building. So I guess we could call that a success.
Absolutely, yeah. Some of my colleagues perhaps don't like me to say it, but I often say that technical security saves the day. We rarely have to shoot a gun. We rarely have to bring a armed force in to protect our missions, even during these types of events. That those doors, locks, alarms, barriers, cameras, those things save people's lives.
And they can be replaced.
And they can be easily replaced.
Right, that's what we do. We plan out those, we strategically put those cameras in place, and when something happens.
They just don't have the bravado, right? They don't, sometimes we don't walk around with the gun and the shield, perhaps, that most people think of when they think of security.
Right.
We're that invisible layer that is pretty durable and allows, again, senior leadership to make those decisions to preserve life.
Let's talk a little bit about the aftermath. So how do you think that lessons learned in Cairo, maybe perhaps even Benghazi, how did that change our role in technical security?
I think it gave additional credence to the importance of that infrastructure. It also helped the technical security office, helped us make strides to improve that technical security apparatus. High definition camera systems was a result of. It was something that we had toiled with for years to improve the visibility of our cameras. As a result, DS secured more money so that we could deploy those systems. I recall a congressional visit to Cairo while Todd Brown was still my RSO, and he invited the congressional delegation in to see the video from that day of the protests.
Right.
And it was pretty stark. Once you pull that video up on a monitor, it was pretty stark to see what was enterprise video was pretty spotchy and grainy. And most, if we're living in 2023, most people have some kind of Ring camera at their home, and it's HD, but it's hard to fathom the idea of that an enterprise would have such bad video quality. But we also had to take into account, and what I had to communicate to that delegation was that we're talking about 275 places around the world.
Right.
That is a huge undertaking. It's an immense cost. These technologies change often.
How many cameras did Cairo have at the time?
So at the time, I believe we had 6 or 7 DVRs of cameras, more than 140 cameras.
So you're piping the video of over 140 cameras back to DC.
Yes. And
they're watching it real time.
And they can watch it real time, right? But it just wasn't the best quality. As the sun goes down, as night lights come on, it's it's not something. It was not as good as what you have at home for your Ring camera on your front door.
Right.
And that was a point that the delegation was, I won't say surprised at, but they pointed it out. And again, the counter argument there is, this is an enterprise. We're not just talking about Cairo, Egypt.
Right.
We're talking about 275 places around the world. That is an immense cost and expense to the United States taxpayer, and it has to be something that's done very smartly, and it also has to be something that Congress and other budgetary seniors earmark for the department, so that we can progress that technology where it's very useful for senior leaders.
So have we changed our approach?
We have. We've adopted some of those practices, incorporated more high definition camera systems around the world.
So Cairo is one of those locations around the world where you can bring your family, your children can go to school.
Iowa.
International schools, very, very good international schools in Cairo. You can bring your pets. What did you do with your family? What was happening with your family during this time?
Yeah. So I'm a unique situation, not unique to the department, but a unique situation in diplomatic security. I'm married to a security engineering officer. So I'm what we call a tandem couple.
Right.
So my wife had a position in Cairo, Egypt. She was actually doing an outer cone job, but we had my wife, my daughter were there in country. So during this time, again, we had just arrived at post.
Wow.
Very new to the situation, still learning, but over time, we saw the benefit of both of us having context of what was happening around. Right. We were both going to the mission. We both interacted with Egyptians and people in the mission, so there was a benefit there. Interesting enough, if we fast forward 12 months, post, we did go on order departure. So after September 11th, the security situation started to degrade to a point. The Egyptians were in a transition between government. They had just kicked out the previous government that had been there for 30 years. Mm-hmm. And they had a newly elected president. Well, 12 months later, they decided that they didn't like that leadership either, and they were going to kick him out.
Right.
And so they had a bloodless revolution, and Post didn't know what was going to happen. And so we went on first authorized departure and then a mandatory departure.
Can you tell us the difference between those?
Yeah. So authorized departure in the State Department's ecosystem is that due to whatever event or whatever happening in your particular post, it's okay for the post will pay for your family or whoever wants to opt out of post temporarily to go home.
So it's just an optional.
It's an optional departure.
Okay. As opposed to
a mandatory order departure, where if you're not identified as, for lack of a better term, essential staff, you have to leave post. My wife and I were both identified as necessities for the organization, but we had at that time a 3-year-old daughter.
Yeah.
And so no spouses, no children could stay at post. And so my wife opted that she would leave and come back to U.S. And she lived in a hotel for 4 months while we were on order departure. It was the first time I learned a great appreciation for people who have to go on order departure, because I was living 2 lives. I was working during the day, and at night I was working through strategies with my wife, who was 6 time zones away, to try to manage our family situation.
Right.
And it has true impact. My daughter would not, we had FaceTime at that point. My daughter would not FaceTime with me. She didn't understand why her dad wasn't with her, right? Or with the family. Right. And so it can be tough, right? It can pull on your heartstrings a little bit.
Yeah. But
I signed up for a job, and my wife recognized and understood that.
And it was for their safety, ultimately.
Absolutely.
For everybody's safety.
For everyone's
we don't make
safety.
these decisions so lightly.
Yeah, they were not done in a vacuum, and there were a lot of considerations made to facilitate making sure folks were not in the wrong time in the wrong place, while the mission there and the government in Egypt was going through this transitional point. And eventually they were able to return back, but we were on order departure for 4 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rahim. It's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast, and thank you for sharing your insights on this topic.
Yeah, thanks, Damaris. I appreciate you guys having me, and I also appreciate the ability to share the stories. Hopefully folks out there who is ever listening can appreciate them as well.
Thank you so much.